Club Penguin, the hit game of what felt like my entire early childhood, and maybe what could go down as the most beloved browser game of all time. Releasing on October 24th, 2005, this game's meteoric success was something that would ultimately go on to kickstart the child-friendly MMO mania that ruled the late 2000s and early 2010s. These free-to-play virtual worlds felt so carefully curated for your parents' credit card, but also for the endless exploration and the magic that went into the world building of these games. I feel like it's hard to explain just how much room some pixels on a screen can take up in your heart. As a child, Club Penguin felt like another universe, shrouded in mystery, full of urban legends that were just waiting for me personally to investigate them. Whether it was flipping the iceberg or attempting to hitch a ride over to Rockhopper's Island, there was always a new rumor circulating around the community. And while there are many fun mysteries that we'll be taking a closer look at today, as we dive deeper into this iceberg, things begin to really take a turn for the worst. While there are some interesting entries around the time that Disney had decided to sunset the franchise, it was ultimately this decision that opened a Pandora's box to the world of private servers. And this is where we'll be exploring some of the main controversies surrounding the fanverse. But before we just dive into the most raw and deplorable entries, let's start off with a little history lesson of Club Penguin's humble beginnings, known as experimental penguins. Tier 1. Club Penguin Origin. While the iconic Club Penguin game we all know and love was released in 2005, conceptually it has actually been around as early as 1999. Game developer Lance Priebe, also known as Rocket Snail, had an idea to create a multiplayer strategy game featuring penguins as the main characters. But before tackling that all at once, Lance had decided to test out the waters in Flash 4, creating what would become the first in a long entry of titles leading up to Club Penguin. And that first entry was Experimental Penguins. Launched in July of the year 2000, each user could give their penguin a name, chat amongst the players online, and really just explore what this world had to offer. Off the rip, Experimental Penguins saw some immediate success on a small scale, averaging over 2,000 daily logins. But sadly, this game started to suffer at the hands of its own success, as the rising server costs simply became too much to handle. And only 1 year after its launch, Experimental Penguins was shut down. But that didn't put a stop to the dream of creating this virtual world. By 2001, Rocket Snail had began working on that multiplayer strategy game titled Snow Blasters. But due to various companies requesting that Rocket Snail build them custom character chats for their own websites, this eventually led the developer to return to Experimental Penguins. And it's around this time that you can really begin to see that personality and magic of Club Penguin come together. Launching in January of 2003, this upgraded version of the game came with a ton of new features, such as emotes, chat balloons, depth sorting, and of course the ability to throw snowballs. And by 2004, this game had attracted more than 1 million users. Taking note that he might have a massive hit on his hands, Lance had turned his focus entirely to creating this virtual world, a safe space for kids to play online, which would ultimately go on to be named Club Penguin. And as this was just a side project for Lance at the time, he would dedicate every Friday to developing this game. So that set a release date for about 2010. A mere 5 years later. However, at this point, Lance was working for New Horizon Productions alongside Lane Merrifield, and together, Dave, Lane, and Lance formed New Horizon Interactive to create Club Penguin. And now, Lance was free to build Club Penguin as a full-time job. And the rest, well, of course, hitting road bumps along the way, it's essentially history. And now that you're all caught up on that history, let's get into the good stuff. And by the good stuff, I'm talking about Rockhopper's Island. If you've ever played Club Penguin before, then without a doubt you'll recognize this black-bearded hunk. Rockhopper was the red pirate penguin, known for sailing the 7.5 seas in search of treasure to bring back and, well, sell to us. Rockhopper's arrival in the world of Club Penguin was always a monumental event. But just as quickly as Rockhopper would arrive, he would vanish back out into the sea. And this is where our first entry in the iceberg begins, the legend of Rockhopper's Island. It's said that during Rockhopper's first journey out to sea, he discovered an uninhabited island full of palm trees and red puffles as far as you could see. And after finding himself repeatedly returning to this same island without ever seeing anyone there, he decided to name the island after himself, and it would eventually become his home away from home. And that's about all we know. It just sort of ends there. With so much left unknown and the hype that was built around Rockhopper, there was constant speculation and videos were uploaded online with specific instructions on how to get to the island, in hopes that upon discovering this island, you'd be granted with as much loot as your heart desired. But as far as we know, this island just never existed. Or should I say, at least no official version of the island was ever added to the game. Let's move on to what is maybe the most iconic rumor that ever made its way around the Club Penguin world. Tipping the iceberg. Legend says that if enough penguins stood or even danced on one side of the iceberg, eventually we would finally see this big block of ice tip over. The goal of doing this? Well, it was kind of unclear. Some rumors state that the player would unlock secret wearable items, be rewarded a free lifetime membership, and explore maybe what was an exclusive and elitist world that took place below the iceberg. Regardless of what your intentions were with flipping it, this rumor grew and grew, and eventually reached the point where I didn't care what reward was below. I was just trying to obtain the valor of being the first penguin to flip this thing. And with constant hints being added in from the developers, it felt like it was only a matter of time until we all figured this out. The most blatant reference had to have come in 2014, during the Halloween party event, when a painting of the tipped iceberg had mysteriously appeared in the corner of the Puffle Hotel dining room. Then again, we would see this same image in 2015, as it would appear for a second time when the lodge attic was renovated. And I mean, at this point, there was very little doubt among the community that the iceberg tipping was real. But after constant hints and no execution, this rumor just sort of sailed away. That was until Club Penguin would announce that it was shutting its servers down for good. And that led to many players going back and trying to figure out this iceberg rumor one last time, only to find out that staff had prepared a little secret for anyone attending the Waddle On party, where finally this iceberg could be tipped. And once it was, a lively dance floor and one final message to the community would be revealed. And that message reads, "Together we can build an island, create a community, change the world, and even tip an iceberg. Waddle on." Now let's move on before I start crying. Card Jitsu Shadow. Being added to the game November 17th, 2008, Card Jitsu added a rather in-depth and sort of lore-heavy element to the game. An element that I think a lot of players didn't really know was missing until we had access to it. Following the success of the original, Card Jitsu would go on to have a total of 4 wacky minigames to play, with these 3 extra games being based on the original 3 elements: fire, water, and snow. But I'm not here to talk about any of these elements or the mini games that accompanied them. No sir. Today, I'm here to dive into the mystery that has plagued me ever since I was just a little fella. I'm talking about Card Jitsu Shadow. And if you aren't familiar, that's okay too. Allow me to explain. Starting off with the amulet. Releasing in 2009 alongside Card Jitsu Fire, this amulet featured a slot for each of the elements that were in the game. As you progress through your journey and master each mini game, you get a gem added into your amulet. But even after completing it, it's almost impossible to just gloss over what lies in the center. This gem. It's been on the minds of Club Penguin members since the day it was released, and still to this day kind of remains a mystery. But after spending more time than I'd like to share with you, researching this whole thing, I think I may have finally come to a conclusion. While there are enough references to this gem that I could probably fill up the rest of the video outlining each one, instead, let's get down to brass tacks here, with what I believe to be the most damning pieces of evidence. As most things do in Club Penguin, this started off as nothing more than folklore. But as this rumor began to spread, the development team started to leave references to this 4th element within the game. And while we know the developers went as far as creating outfits for each of the 3 elements within the game, another variant of these outfits actually lies buried within the Club Penguin codebase that ultimately went unreleased to the public. This fit consists of the Helmet of Shadows, the Nightfall coat, the Midnight Mask, and the Shade Sandals. But when taking a better look at this outfit, embedded in the helmet, we can see that same mysterious gem appear that had caused this uproar in the first place. And when worn together, this outfit allows the players to perform a special dance and a special wave. So with proof in place that Card Jitsu Shadow was a real concept, we can move on to how exactly would this have been used. And we can find, I don't know, some evidence to that within the power card titled Mobile Firepower Card 1, where when putting this card into action, the player can be seen getting fitted up in that full shadow outfit, leading the following to take place. But I guess what all of this means is sort of up for you to decide. Knowing what we do know about Cardjitsu Shadow, I'll end this entry with one final piece of evidence that I think sends us off in the right direction. When asked about the game in one of his appearances, Sensei had stated that there might be Shadow someday, as well as saying one element at a time. There are various interviews with staff members outlined that sort of led me to my final conclusion. If Club Penguin had been granted more time to complete the lore that took place within the game, I would say it's all but confirmed that we would have Cardjitsu Shadow. But the unfortunate reality is that they didn't. So now we're sort of left here as fans picking up the pieces. Ninja Shadows. The ninjas of Club Penguin have made more appearances than you might know of. While the search of Club Penguin Ninja Shadows will often turn up Cardjitsu Shadow, there was also another phenomenon taking place, more subtly in the world that you may or may not have noticed. Ninja Shadows would sometimes appear in different areas throughout the world. The first ninja that had been discovered was the one that would hang out in the ski lodge mirror, leading many users to speculate that this had something to do with the, at the time of discovery, empty dojo. And as this would continue to take place and ninjas would go on to be spotted in various areas, it was eventually confirmed by the Club Penguin team that these Ninja Shadows had been linked to the dojo, and they had been building mystery and hype for the upcoming game. But the unanswered question still begs, who are these ninjas and why only the shadows? The director's identity. The director is the leader of both the Penguin Secret Agency as well as the Elite Penguin Force. The director was known for being calm, cool, and collected, always having things under control. But this character did fall under speculations of all kinds from the fanbase, trying to unveil the director's identity. Some users believe that the director could potentially be unnamed light blue guitarist, while others thought maybe it was Rory. But the story of how the identity of the director came to be is sort of a strange one. And while in the end it would ultimately be revealed to be Antarctic, more so than the team finding a director, through a barrage of coincidences, the director sort of found them. This all began while Screenhog was making the tic-tac-toe code. After ending up with one extra symbol and being unsure of what to do with it, it was eventually decided that this symbol could be used as the special signature for a director of the Penguin Agency. But this begged the question of, well, who was going to be that director? And at that time, with only one Penguin character actually having a name, and with the plethora of these pre-built accidental connections that were already made, it sort of seemed as if the link between the team and Antarctic was fated to be. These connections included Antarctic's Q&A column in the newspaper, and the vast amount of knowledge that she had. Antarctic's glasses turning a little Men in Black-like upon clicking her in the catalog. And while the team did attempt to hold out for better options, Antarctic was eventually crowned the role of the director. The box dimension. The box dimension is another dimension that is made up entirely of cardboard boxes. This room was sort of space-esque in a way, due to the fact that it featured a low-gravity environment. This is the reason why you could see things such as cardboard boxes, plants, and even snowballs just floating around. But while we could only see one tiny segment of this box dimension, the true full scope of this area is unknown, due to the purple mist that clouds what's visible. First accessible to users on April 1st, 2009, this area was almost definitely implemented as a little bit of an April Fool's prank by the devs, but there is more than meets the eye to this big purple expanse. During the Puffle parties from 2011 to 2013, the box dimension was home to orange puffles that could be seen floating around. And well, I mean, that's just sort of strange in itself. The Club Penguin team may have tipped us off with how these fellas arrived here, revealing that the various boxes in the box dimension are actually gateways to other dimensions. Some of these that we know of are the desert dimension, the doodle dimension, and of course the orange puffle dimension. This entire area being made up of boxes means that by jumping in any one of these, you could kind of end up anywhere, but you might want to take your chances just diving into these cardboard caverns. As showcased in the Puffle launch minigame, not all of these boxes just lead to dimensions. Some teleport you and others just explode upon touching them. And in case that's not dangerous enough for you, who could forget about the box dragon from 2009? This entire entry just kind of became more of a safety precaution for cardboard boxes in Club Penguin than anything else. So I guess what I'm trying to say is stay safe out there. Tier 2. Ugh, Pookies. So let's just dive in. A Pookie, described on the Club Penguin Pookie Wiki. I'm probably gonna be on a list for even visiting this, but yeah, okay. A Pookie is a baby on Club Penguin. Being a Pookie was essentially a form of in-game role-playing that most often took place in the pet shop. Players would style their penguin in whatever outfit they felt suitable. Most commonly, Pookies were associated with the bee antenna, a tiara, and anything pink. These players would crowd the pet store, only speaking in that early internet kind of language. The idea of this is to get adopted by no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. The intent is to find a parent and roleplay with your newfound family that just scooped you up from the pet shop. And well, I really want to believe that Pookie roleplay was just innocent kids having fun. The cynicism rooted in me has a hard time finding this cute in any way, as I just imagine that the majority of this community, probably more specifically the moo-moos and Dadas? Probably middle-aged men interested in another form of CP that has nothing to do with penguins. If anyone remembers this, please leave a comment. I took a gamble including this in the Iceberg at all, and if I'm the only one who remembers this, I'm gonna look so weird. The Sony buyout. What if I told you that someplace, somewhere, maybe in the box dimension, Club Penguin is Sony's largest, most advanced AAA series? And well, that's kind of a funny thought to imagine. A quick Google search will tell you everything you need to know about how this almost happened. Allegedly, talks had been taking place between Sony and Club Penguin for the exclusive acquisition of the franchise, for the rumored price of $500 million. However, in an article written by TechCrunch, there is a stumbling block that had been taking place in the negotiations that appeared to be over Club Penguin's charitable donations of all things. With Club Penguin donating a significant portion of profits to charity and moving into this deal with the hopes of this policy continuing post-acquisition, the article states that Sony reportedly wasn't too hot on that idea. And it was this stalling that could have been what allowed Disney to swoop in and scoop the franchise up. This article was released on May 16th, 2007, and only 3 months later the news had broke that the Walt Disney Company acquired Club Penguin for a whopping $700 million. However, that wasn't really true. This deal was structured in a way that would ultimately favor Disney. The deal consisted of $350 million guaranteed in cash, with the promise of an additional $350 if Club Penguin had reached their performance targets for the game through 2009, which the company failed to meet, leaving Disney with a little extra cash to spare. And while this Sony buyout is rarely ever discussed anymore, I still can't help but wonder what the future of Club Penguin would have looked like had that deal gone through. The accidental ban. Getting banned from Club Penguin is like a coming-of-age story that was only right for anyone who was ever involved in the world. And while getting banned really wasn't that hard in itself, there was quite a few times where the game would get its wires crossed and ban you for illegitimate reasons. And some of them are, I mean, they're honestly really funny looking back at it now. In the Puffle Party of 2012, there was a glitch that had gone around where anyone who danced was immediately served a ban. As well, in 2012, anyone who entered the stadium during the music jam was served 24 hours. As all of the users sort of began growing up, getting banned from Club Penguin just became a running joke. In 2013, the subreddit r/ban from Club Penguin had been created, ending up garnering 83.8 thousand members before being archived last year. And while this subreddit helped the wave of memes that would ensue, I don't think there's anything more funny in the entire Club Penguin world than what the speedrunning community had done with this. Once the game had announced the closure of its servers, getting banned from Club Penguin, I mean, it held no weight anymore. Even for members that ran up credit cards to create their account, I mean, they had nothing left to lose. And this is what led to multiple users trying their hand at seeing just how fast they could speedrun a ban. But so the true record belongs to a user who goes by the name of Camological, holding the world record at 33 seconds. If I'm wrong on this, feel free to correct me in the comments, but from what I could uncover, I mean, I think this is the fastest, but I'm not an expert. Polar Bear Mods. This entry actually exists in the Iceberg for one reason and one reason only, and that would be Chris Hendrick's upload to YouTube from around 3 years ago, titled 10 Things You Didn't Know About the Making of Club Penguin. Chris, also known as Screenhog, was a member of the Club Penguin staff who had mainly worked on audio, art animation, and writing for the game. Within this video, Chris outlines the rejected concept for polar bear mods existing within the world of Club Penguin. While everyone is familiar with Herbert, how would you feel if I told you that Herbert was a narc all along? The idea pitched that was, instead of moderators, those in charge of keeping the game safe and fun for kids, walking around as penguins, sort of blending in with the dirty, no-good civilians like you and me, these mods would walk around as polar bears, making them stand out and easily be identified as authority figures. And while Screenhog even went as far as prototyping these assets, including standing, sitting, and walking animations for the polar bears, the team had recognized quite a few issues with the mods. One of the main ones being the idea that polar bears wouldn't really be authority figures, but rather celebrities to be sought after within the game. The second main issue being that when a polar bear was out of the presence of a penguin at large, the rules essentially go out the window, leaving a potential player to feel bulletproof at that moment in time because there's no authority present. And with all of that in mind, the polar bears have been crossed off the map, leaving us with only Herbert. And if anyone wants to check out Chris Hendricks himself, I'll make sure to drop his channel in the description. He has a wonderfully creative mind, and that's exactly the side of Club Penguin content that he shares. So if you are interested in, this Iceberg or learning more about Club Penguin, I highly recommend it. Tops Card Jitsu. While Card Jitsu was a smash hit within the world of Club Penguin, outside of this tiny little world, I don't exactly think I'd feel comfortable saying the same for the IRL card game that followed. While many people either forgot or simply just didn't even know about this, Tops, the American company that manufactures chewing gum, candy, and collectibles, actually got a hold of the Club Penguin IP and released an entire series of cards for what was to be the Card Jitsu trading card game. This set was released on November 17th, 2008. Although these cards are a little hard to come by these days, you can still find them floating around on eBay. But they're gonna cost you a couple of coins, alright? Especially the more limited ones. Good God. If anyone's actually interested in having a look through all of these cards, I'll leave a Google Doc just full of resources for this video in my bio. The Giant Squid. At surface level, the water surrounding Club Penguin looks, well, relatively safe for the most part. However, that might not be the case. This mysterious beast made its first appearance in the clam waters level of Aqua Grabber. Most players of this game can attest to seeing this at least once, as the giant squid had around a 5% chance of appearing when you first started the level. Appearing as a shadow, letting out a roar accompanied by some screen shaking, before quickly vanishing into the depths. This mystery sort of plagued a lot of users. So let's take a look at this little fellow's cameos within the game and get to the bottom of this mystery. Following its first appearance, the next time that we would see this squid is in 2010, when Club Penguin added Puffle Rescue, where the squid will cast a trail of bubbles, leading you to a secret entrance and ultimately the Moss Key. After this, the squid wouldn't appear for about a year, making its next big cameo at the Island Adventure Party of 2011, where when throwing a fish into the water, the squid will arrive, gobble it up, and all the while remaining a mystery. But all of that built up to this one moment, the most anticipated battle in all of Club Penguin, Captain Rockhopper versus the infamous giant squid, where the squid can be seen just blowing chunks all over Rockhopper's freshly oiled poop deck. And in turn, that's all we really know about this giant squid. But I mean, really, this is Club Penguin. What were you expecting? The Megalodon. Every hour on the hour, what is often perceived as a shark fin would pop up out of the water and let out a little prehistoric roar. And as we would come to learn, this was not a simple shark at all. This prehistoric beast was known as the Megalodon. But what is a 23-million-year-old shark doing cutting it up at the Club Penguin Iceberg? Well, thanks to the time trekker, we sort of know where Meg's origins begin. It all starts back at the prehistoric party of 2013, where you could go and visit the prehistoric renditions of classic areas among all the party rooms available, such as the town center being renamed to Stony Town, the beach being renamed to Big Water Place, and of course the iceberg named Scary Ice. And if you pull out your magnifying glass and take a closer look just right here, you might see what is a giant shark. Oh my God. But luckily for us, at the time of this party, don't worry, it was frozen solid. However, that wasn't for long, because in the prehistoric party of 2014, this shark somehow escaped the ice prison that it was locked in. And from here, we would go on to see it surrounding the iceberg, and even read about mysterious sightings of a creature lurking in the water, written in the Club Penguin Times. And while its escape mostly remained a mystery, issue 464 of the Club Penguin Times actually gives us some insight into how this all happened. In the article, it stated that the Megalodon escaped due to increased volcanic activity that made Scary Ice just a little warmer. Ghost memberships. Now, this entry in the iceberg is one I swear I can personally relate to, but I have no proof. Although optional, getting a membership in Club Penguin was pretty much the key to squeezing out all the fun that you could have in the game. With a membership, you could access features like buying clothes, collecting stamps, adopting puffles, just sort of everything that the game was about. And while you could choose 1, 3, 6, 6 or even 12 months of membership at one time, many members have reported only making these purchases once and still having full unfettered access to all the features of a membership. And that's essentially what this ghost membership is. Even after your expiry date is met and passed, the membership perks still hang around. If this has ever happened to you, please leave a comment. I swear I remember only buying 1 or 2 memberships but having access for so much longer. The tragic tale of Claudius. Of all the crabs featured in Club Penguin, there are only 3 of these crustaceans that actually have names. There's Klutzy and Klepto, but one grizzled old angry crab remains shrouded in mystery. The only time that we ever really get to see Claude is through odd little cameos, the first of which comes from the spy phone. When building out this phone, the dev team behind it had assigned Claudius as the placeholder image. Therefore, whenever an image potentially errored out or wasn't assigned to an agent properly, Claudius was just there staring menacingly at you. Claudius would go on to make another cameo on the EPF-themed login screen from August 2011. And while Claude would make, a few appearances here and there, this is about as deep as the character goes. And while it never became canon as to why Claudius was quite so angry, I was able to dig up a bit of tragic lore that had been shared in the weeks leading up to Club Penguin shutting down its servers. Claudius was going to make his debut in a crab mob storyline. This storyline was eventually scrapped by the team due to unknown reasons. So with this implementation of Claudius being scrapped, Claude was later revived and used as a concept for Club Penguin Island, where the idea was brought up of changing Claudius into the almighty Queen Claudia, which again never made it past the concept stage due to the closure of yet another game. Therefore, the story of Claudius comes to a tragic halt, this little fella being left to spend the rest of eternity somewhere encased in a pixel prison of emptiness. The moderator report theory? This button triggered a menu that was used to report penguins that had broken the rules within your area. Once you had selected the offending penguin, you'd be granted a list of reasons to report them. These consisted of things like using bad words, sharing personal information, being rude or mean, and even just something as simple as having a foul username. These reports would then go on to be reviewed by moderators that would decide if the report was worthy of pulling out the ban hammer. But online, there seems to be a discussion that this report button ultimately just sent your report straight into the trash. And well, a part of me kind of believes it. I remember reporting countless people, and never once did I face any consequences for filing false reports, nor did I ever see anyone get banned. I was a more frequent player around the time that Club Penguin was putting up, insanely high login numbers on a daily basis. So one of my main theories is that there'd be an overwhelming number of reports, and there'd be no possible way for anyone to keep up with this. But with Club Penguin's 2 main focuses being safety and fun, I sort of find it hard to believe that they would just trash the reports. Most likely, these probably were screened by bots that would scan through chat logs and identify any issues with the associated report. But let me know what you think in the comments about this one. I'm curious if anyone actually received a ban via a moderator report. 2011 Unplugged? On June 20th, 2011, 12 million penguins had been denied access to their igloos for hours on end. Club Penguin had experienced downtime several times since its release date, but never to an extent like this. And as a kid, what was I supposed to do? Go outside? While many speculated that Club Penguin had been shut down or potentially experienced a cyber attack so large it collapsed the servers, in typical Club Penguin fashion, rumors began spreading fast, until we finally discovered the real cause of this. Disney had forgotten to renew the domain license for clubpenguin.com. The Club Penguin domain expired on June 13th of 2011, but it wasn't taken offline until the early hours of June 20th. Allegedly, Disney had been warned several times that this domain would be expiring soon, but still failed to renew prior to its expiry. What users saw on the website at the time varied between a clown or a golfer. All I can tell you is it was anything but penguins. However, all was mended in the end. Some users had been granted a free 1-week membership, while others had been awarded 10,000 coins. Bait items. While the world of Club Penguin was often just full of little angels, like myself of course, just tending to my penguin duties, deep down inside all of us, I think there was a horrible monster that thirsted for exclusive items. So much so to the point that I would have done anything to get my hands on a rare item and go for a strut around town. And while I was too naive to ever really know that cheats existed back then, I fear that my 8-year-old self would not have been able to hold back. However, in situations where that did happen, the Club Penguin team had hidden bait items in the game. The idea of this was to trick cheaters and exploiters of the game to equip one of these items onto their penguin, which would find the player essentially caught red-handed, only to be immediately banned. Some of the pure bait items include like Rockhopper's 2013 holo holiday beard, and even a bunk bed or a sleeping bag to stash in your igloo. Fortune Street assets. This in itself has to be one of the strangest things to be found in a game's codebase. Fortune Street is a Wii game developed by Square Enix, and at its core, this game is sort of like a revamped virtual Monopoly meets Mario Party kind of thing. But anyways, that's not important. What we're focusing on in this entry is what lies unused inside this game's codebase. And while unused content isn't really anything out of the ordinary for games, there is just this one peculiar image just lying here. Title.cmp.arc contains a placeholder title texture from Club Penguin Game Day. And while it seemed so bizarre to me at first, there's actually a very simple explanation that sort of clears this whole thing up. The developers of Fortune Street had accidentally copied over this texture from the codebase of Game Day. What they were really searching for was the "please wear the Wiimote wrist strap" screen, and the reason the developers even had access to this in the first place is because Artoon, a Japanese game development company responsible for the creation of Game Day, had been absorbed into Marvelous Inc., previously known as Marvelous AQL. Marvelous being the developers behind Fortune Street. Humans in Game Day? Even the quickest of Google searches for a Club Penguin Iceberg will often have this entry at the lowest of lows on the iceberg. And I'm sorry, but I'm kind of just here to debunk this one and end whatever people think it is or could be. In Club Penguin's third console entry, titled Club Penguin Game Day, when digging through the game's codebase, a few strange and mysterious unused textures had been found. These include a Sensei color texture that was cut from the game, a realistic fish texture, and this nightmare-inducing image of what looks like Steve from Blue's Clues. But unfortunately, these have absolutely nothing to do with Club Penguin. These textures had just been left over in the codebase, but they actually came from Nintendo's software development kit, meaning that at best, these were just used for testing and nothing more. Club Penguin Armies and Cults? Founded in 2006, the Club Penguin Army community was a tight-knit role-playing community, not to be confused with the Pookies. These armies are built for battle and pizza parties too. But what exactly is an army, or sometimes often considered cults by those on the outside? Well, it's really no different than something like an in-game guild, for example. An army is classified as a team or group of players on Club Penguin that are organized with team leads or a sole leader in place. These groups would have things such as specific uniforms, member ranks, playing the game while being connected through, I don't know, some form of communication, whether that was Discord or TeamSpeak, I don't know what they used back then. However, to be an army, you had to have at least 5 active members and host an event with a minimum of 5 people. For those who didn't meet these requirements, they would simply be labeled as gangs within the community. And in the early years of armies coming to life, penguins would divide themselves into separate factions, such as Team Blue or Team Red, before eventually spreading far beyond just the 2 colors, therefore dubbing themselves as armies. Some of these armies actually existed right up until the game had been sunset by Disney. This community is like an entire subgenre of Club Penguin in itself. And the more you look into these, the more it makes sense why people refer to them as cults. You could find yourself within one of 2 parts of this community, either as an army member or as a part of the media. One of the staples for getting caught up on the latest news was Club Penguin Army Central. Started in 2009, this website was self-proclaimed as the #1 army news site. These groups were incredibly well run, engaging in competitions, and these armies even had their own controversies arise, with feuds existing between different groups. There's an entire wiki dedicated to each of these armies with detailed lore existing for each and every single one that had existed. And while I'd love to just sit here all day and dive into these in much greater detail, I've ultimately come to the conclusion that if I did, I'd have to write multiple novels by the end of this. Penguin Memories. Well, I've seen small clips of this video popping up online for what has to be years now, in various different ways, mostly comedic. Personally, I always thought this was like some sort of strange fan animation that made its rounds on meme pages every few years. However, when doing a little research, despite drawing an eerie similarity between the penguins that we know, this is not actually related to Club Penguin in any way, shape, or form. This movie was released June 22nd, 1985, 20 years before Club Penguin was even released. This movie tells the story of a penguin named Mike Davis and his journey after returning home home from the Delta War. Up until this point, I had made an honest attempt at not including fan-related content or third-party content until the end, but I felt like I had to address this as it just continuously appeared throughout my research. And I mean, come on, this resemblance is uncanny. Let me know if you're familiar with seeing this clip before or if I'm just chronically online. Penguin's secret agency Illuminati inspo? While this title at first glance could probably be a little alarming, the story behind how the PSA secret code came to be is actually quite a fascinating one. While building out the secret agent catalog for the upcoming missions, adding things such as secret agent conduct and top secret information, Screenhog had stumbled onto the idea of adding a secret code into the game. However, the code at hand had a few quirks that needed to be worked out before they could just unveil this language. The most prominent being that it would have to be simple enough for an 8-year-old to understand it. And looking for inspiration for secret codes, Screenhog in his video titled The Secrets of Club Penguin's PSA Code outlines the situation where he had picked up a book from what he describes as a
church book swap yard sale kind of thing.
This book was titled Codes and Secret Writing, and inside this book is where the inspiration had first been drawn up. And the code that Screenhog specifically took a liking to was called the Pigpen Cipher. And this code in itself wasn't necessarily the problem, but more so the likes of who this code seemed to be associated with, the Freemasons. And with the obvious link between the Freemasons and the Illuminati, while the PSA Penguin code took inspiration from this, it was obviously in no way associated with or had anything to do with these secret groups. So for this entry and this entry alone, it's probably safe to peel off those tinfoil hats and just take it for what it is. The meltdown of Club Penguin Island. Club Penguin Island was what was supposed to be considered the successor to Club Penguin. Releasing worldwide on March 29th, 2017, with the hopes of keeping the franchise alive, those hopes and dreams ultimately came to a halting crash. When only a year later, on November 20th, 2018, it was removed from the Google Play and App Store. Unfortunately, by this time, I had long checked out from the franchise. I think I downloaded this app once for maybe 30 minutes at most. So while I can't speak from any level of personal experience, I can share my findings. But before I do, if you enjoyed this game, that is completely fine and there's nothing wrong with that. However, following its release, this game was heavily critiqued by new and old fans of the franchise alike. Many of the criticisms that I found seem to feel like this game was, at its core, a cash grab, lacking personality and that same spirit that the original game was so full of. And I mean, really, could you blame anyone for feeling like this? The classic charm of the original Club Penguin had suffered a slow and painful demise. And I mean, at this point, it just looks like people were here poking the corpse of what Disney had done to this game. While Club Penguin had its interesting crossover events that were ultimately used as marketing ploys, Club Penguin Island took this to a whole nother level. This game, being released at the same time as Disney Interactive had been shut down, following the failure of Disney Infinity, had sort of led the fan base to wonder, like, what was the intention behind Club Penguin Island? Was this some sort of a last-ditch Hail Mary at reviving Disney's studio, with the hopes that it could generate profits to the tune of other monster mobile franchises, only to get dunked on by a rather upset fan base, and various YouTubers conducting raids within the world of Club Penguin? The most iconic being the raids run by Quackity and the community surrounding this creator, ultimately crashing the servers seemingly time and time again. And while obviously these raids didn't lead to the game's demise in any way, I think there's more than a few reasons for that. But you kind of have to wonder what kind of toll events like these took on the remaining staff responsible for cleaning up messes like this, as it seemed like the only time the servers ever had life in them was when players were hopping on intentionally trying to break the game. And so, I mean, eventually, Club Penguin Island just released a message to players, announcing that the Club Penguin franchise would be sunsetted once and for all. After 13 incredible years, it was time to waddle on into the void. Not with a bang like the original Club Penguin had, but much more of a whimper as this game sort of just faded into irrelevancy, to be almost immediately forgotten. CPO Meltdown. A Club Penguin private server is in no way part of the original, but rather a server that makes use of unlicensed SWF files from Club Penguin, a database and a server emulator in order to create an almost identical environment for these games to exist. The These servers build off of already existing elements of Club Penguin, but they contain features that didn't exist within the original world, with things like custom items, custom rooms, free memberships, and a lot more. These servers existed for a while though. There was a ton that existed long before Disney had shut down this franchise. But of course, as previously mentioned, we'd begin seeing these servers popping up more and more with Disney officially retiring Club Penguin for good. And it made sense. There was obviously a large population that still had a soft spot for the game. The Waddle-On Party sort of rekindled a long-lost love for this game that had at large been forgotten by a generation of users that just sort of grew up. And with the doors shutting for good when that party came to an end, those emotions just had nowhere to go. For many, it sort of felt like they were losing a key part of their childhood. Therefore, many turned to private servers as a way to continue playing the game. The original team, whose main practices relied on safety and fun, were no longer the ones behind these servers. And not every developer had good intentions. While some ran them for fun, others ran them for profit, power, or other nefarious reasons. And with that in mind, there is one that stands above all as the most deplorable private server to ever exist, and that is Club Penguin Online. This was a server that had essentially rivaled Club Penguin Rewritten, as oftentimes many creators within the fandom compared the two. But Club Penguin Online took this game in a direction that I genuinely don't think anyone was asking for. And ultimately, its true colors went on to shine bright on one of the biggest stages in the world. CPO offered an 18+ server to its users. And while I do understand the purpose of separating the demographic, with anonymous users engaging in the website, CPO 18+ essentially offered users a thinly veiled mask of anonymity. But the problem was, all you had to do was simply click, "Yes sir, I'm 18," without ever verifying your age. There wasn't even a sign on the site that had requested you seek parents' permission. It violated COPPA laws off the bat. Therefore, unsupervised kids often found themselves in adult spaces. CPO featured an unhinged chat that had zero profanity filters, a team of moderators who seemed to be playing the game for themselves and oftentimes being at the center of drama, rather than actually, moderating the game. In the BBC's article on exactly what they had uncovered in their visit to this server included
Penguin E6.
While the original Club Penguin had actually banned numbers from entering the chat, due to naive children giving away things like phone numbers and zip codes, this chat had allowed it. And therefore, many users had been seen exchanging Snapchat accounts, Discord usernames, and with just those alone, you could imagine how things would escalate from there. But I mean, of course, the owner of CPO didn't seem to have a problem with any of this. And maybe that was because he's under some pretty heavy allegations himself. And while I won't deep dive these allegations, I'll show you one pretty damning piece of evidence that might back up my case. And with all of this blowing up on YouTube and the internet alike through multiple large vocal figures on the platform, CPO had made a statement about closing the platform down. But before they could, Disney had caught wind of this situation and had hit the server with a cease and desist, essentially being the one domino that caused what would be a full-blown rolling blackout on all of the private servers that existed at this time. Something that not only just scared off the majority of small private servers housing communities looking to rekindle a fun and safe relationship with a now abandoned game, it also sort of painted everyone in the community in a very bad light. Therefore, with this situation escalating to a height that had become impossible to ignore, the police had eventually seized CPO, and of course had arrested one male under some pretty serious pretenses that I mentioned earlier. CPO had gone on to tarnish the name of Club Penguin and leave a permanent stain on its reputation. It wasn't even really the CPO staff or Riley himself that was left to clean up the mess or feel the full effect that it had caused, but rather the victims of this horrible situation and the surrounding abiding communities. I had second thoughts about including this as the last entry because it sort of feels like a sad ending to what Club Penguin has actually become, but unfortunately I think that's kind of the reality right now. But all of that aside, personally, despite what the internet has done to this game, I choose to remember Club Penguin in my own way. I choose to remember the mysteries, the friendships I made, the hours I spent playing minigames, card jitsu, and although it is just some silly pixels on a screen, this game meant a lot to me. And if you've made it this far into the video, I hope it meant a lot to you as well. So I'll conclude the Iceberg here and say thank you very much for sticking around to the end. I really do appreciate it. These videos take a lot more time than I'd like to admit. So make sure to subscribe and I'll see you soon for another video that I think you'll like.